Now 8:23. I'm not exactly sure when the absolute time of the full moon will be on this, the 6th of October 2025, a Monday night. However, I do want to point out something. For some reason, I had to go into a planetary imaging mode for the night. And that reason probably is because the moon's extremely bright. I did have to play with the focus quite a bit after the scope settled down the temperature. I wasn't able to have perfect focus for studies, um, deep sky studies, but at least I was able to capture and give a hint of the 7,000 to 7,100 series surveyed among some of the brighter galaxies and clusters, globular and open. This is our view of the moon. We're going to sustain it for 15 minutes. We're going to also be using it. The main reason I do it these days is I want to see something fly over the moon, but a secondary reason is that I would like to do a little bit more lunography. Well, we have geography on the Earth, so we learn our way around the Earth, but we have lunography is maybe a word I made up, but I don't care. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'll be looking online to identify many of the features we're now seeing, but I would point something out right away. We are seeing the moon full, so it's very difficult to determine which direction, and the scope is now pointing east. But generally, my experience has been, and with the moon, that you get most of your craters to the south of the moon. You get most of your maria, and the principal one we want to look at here, this more visible part, which I think looks like a lobster. And this is Mare Crisium, and this, I believe, is Tranquillitatis, and then there's Serenitatis and a few others. I will map them out. Don't worry about it. This crater plane, this walled plain over here is Plato, and this walled plain over here is Grimaldi. Something extraordinary you begin to see at the full moon to these rays, and these are the result of these impact craters spreading around the material from whatever struck them. It's probably not material from the moon itself, but from the object in space, probably a comet, because the material is so bright, not necessarily an asteroid. We also have at least a crater over here that's extremely brilliant that we should certainly name. But what I'm going to try to do is keep things to a minimum. The last time I did some lunar cartography, I got a little overwhelmed. I haven't remembered much of it. This time I'm going to try to follow some kind of a formula. Let me see if I can get the moon to center up a little better here. All right. There is some drift, which means I probably should play with one of the axes. And I may do that at the end, but I'm not going to do it during this image capture, real-time image capture. We are seeing the moon in real time, so if anything flies over it, we will know what time we started, and we're going to go for 15 minutes. We'll know where the moon is. We'll know what part of the moon it passed over. I have seen birds. They can be fairly sharp if they're distant to the scope. I have seen insects. They're usually very diffuse and out of focus because they're nearby. One time at the eyepiece, I did see a commercial plane fly in front of the moon. It looked pretty sharp at the eyepiece. But let's leave that aside. What we're going to do right now is begin with a little bit of lunar cartography. If you the first person to really view the moon and record it was Galileo Galilei, and what he would have seen with a small scope is pretty much what we would see with a good set of 10 by 50 binoculars. He would have seen the seas, he would have seen larger craters, and he would have seen some of these mountains suggested bordering the various seas. There is one Oceanus Procellarum on the moon. This is considered an ocean. These are considered seas. These are considered like parts of the ocean, and this would be considered its own separate sea. There are seas. The one I recognize the most is Crisium. Tranquillitatis, we may know from the landing of the first Apollo, I believe it was Apollo 11, in July, I believe, of 1969 on the moon. The last landing, I think, occurred in 72 or 73. After that, NASA just did not publicize. If they did conduct new missions, publicize them. They may have switched technology. Some ufologists believe that they may have actually started using EM-gravitic craft that were developed. Initially, the technique was rediscovered, I believe, by T.T. Brown. Now, this is all hypothetical because I can't cite facts. All I've done is done some research on it because I find it of interest. If we're ever going to travel to other worlds, we may get there, a few of them, by using fire-breathing Dragon rockets. But if we're really ever travel distantly to other stars, we're going to have to develop an entirely different mode of propulsion. And that mode of propulsion may already be visible flying Earth skies in near space and possibly under the ocean. And that kind of propulsion would have to do with somehow deflecting gases away easily without them actually impacting the metal fuselage of craft, rendering those craft weightless, and then using some form of propulsion that can also use gravity to attract or repel. This approach to transport obviously is hypothetical. There's lots of data about it and lots of stories that have been told about it. But look, it's a hypothetical until you yourself get aboard such a craft. But we'll give it a probability, and my research says it's approaching 90% probability that there are actually craft flying around that do not have to use propulsion of the conventional kind. They're capable of rapid acceleration, high-speed turns at very high g-forces that would otherwise crush any living thing inside it, except maybe an insect because they have that as exoskeletons. All right, so having left off with this hypothetical of there being a kind of craft that we would call super-aeronautical, breaking all the rules that we know about in terms of transport, let's focus on the moon. So I will wait until the manana to caption and label things on the moon. The things I will caption, as I did in my last video, is to try to find a featured Maria with a crater inside of it. And we will look for the brightest and most obvious ones. We will look for other craters such as this, which may be Tycho, but I'm not sure. And this, which is the walled plain Plato, which I've always loved to observe at high magnification and see if I can see any of its smaller craters within it. We have the walled plain Grimaldi. So let's say to the moon's east is Crisium, to its west is Grimaldi, to its north is crater Plato, and off over here are a large number of craters to the south, which I have documented already, a few of them that were located here in this region. So we will be looking south and north and west and east, identifying major features. Let's take a look at some of these major features. Obviously, Crisium, these seas, this Oceanus Procellarum, these seas over here. This crater here makes a lot of sense because it's right in the center of the moon and is also quite bright. This other one, crater here, we'll try to mark that one up. This is a huge crater that pretty worn down, but it should be of interest. Here's another one of interest. This over here will be of interest. And I will not necessarily label them based on what I just pointed out. I will go systematically, probably beginning with Crisium and heading towards Grimaldi, going north and south and covering these Maria. I will say this about Maria. Maria exists because the Earth's gravitational tug created a tide on any molten substances that were hot enough to flow after the moon's formation. Current theories are the moon was formed when the Earth was struck by a large body, threw off a lot of material. Much of the material in the moon is very Earth-like in terms of minerality, isotopes, etc., ratios of chemical substances. The moon is presumably solid. Some people hypothesize it's hollow. I doubt that myself. Its materials, and you can tell that by where the transition zone is between the Earth and the moon in terms of gravitational attraction. At some point, the Earth surrenders to the moon. It's probably about 45,000 miles from we just saw an insect pass. So we've seen our first insect transition over the face of the moon. Like I said, where the gravitational point shifts from the Earth to the moon is of significance because that shift determines the relative masses of the two bodies. Some people have called the Earth-Moon system a double planet. I would probably not say that, largely because the point of orbitation, the point where the two planets, the two-body system orbits around, is within the Earth. If it had been outside of the Earth, I would say, like Pluto, Charon, and its other satellites, which all revolve around a common point, that those are, if a planet at all, because a multiple planetary system, because the point of gravitational orbit lies outside Pluto itself. We're going to make an adjustment in the moon. We jumped it up. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't get all of the moon into the picture tonight, largely because for some reason it decided to zoom 31% instead of 20% when I went into this particular imaging system, but we are imaging display application, but we are getting a really sharp view of the moon. Now, because it's 8:30, Saturn won't be particularly high, so I probably will not capture an image of Saturn this evening unless I decide to go in and do something else, typically watch Netflix or Prime for a couple hours this evening and come back out. That may very well transpire. We're now almost 13 minutes into this video. Even though I've articulated quite a bit of information in it, I will start lunography early in the video and start putting up captions. I know it's a distraction to have an image of something, to have captions of something, to have me playing background multi-instrumental jazz music of something, especially if I do plan to sing another insect passage. But, you know, we can learn to multitask, and we can learn to focus despite distractions. And boy, do we have a lot of distractions in our world today. And we all have to learn to figure out what to set aside and what to focus on, when we need to multitask and when we need to stay pretty much focused on a single thing. Let me move this. Oh, another insect passage. Oh, we've got at least 3 of them tonight, possibly 4. But nothing that I would ascribe to being a unidentified aerial phenomena or a UFO. 14 minutes, 10 seconds in. We will give this another 45 seconds. Another insect. Boy, the insects are really out in droves with this full moon, aren't they? Makes perfectly good sense to insects and should make sense to us. But you will not hear me howling at the moon tonight, and I haven't heard anyone howling yet. That is a very nice, sharp view of the moon. What I will do after the 15 minutes has passed, so we've done a good sample, is I will do a zoom just to see how sharp the image can be. 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 15 minutes in. Let's do that image zoom before we go out. Let's see what the percentages are so we know what they are. 31% is probably somewhere around 75. 40%, we'll call it 100. You're only seeing the boxed version of this. 50% should be 150x. That's 150x view of the moon. Boy, it still looks sharp. Oh, we just saw something probably bird-like fly over. That was outside the bounds of my 15 minutes, but I'm going to see what it looked like anyway. 70%, still looking quite sharp. Oh my God, this is beautiful. 80%, 90%. This is 300x at 90%. We are seeing atmospheric shimmering, but things do look quite sharp. And with that, I'm going to say, seize the night and carpe noctem.